on to Mr. Chandrasekhar. He is the head IS audit for Yoganandh and Ram. The quote to remember is compliance is its presence is not felt, but absence is felt everywhere. I think that's what he is doing. And how many of you know what is VUCA world? Okay, fine. It's a current buzzword in the world. What VUCA stands for is volatility. V stands for volatility. U stands for uncertainty. C stands for complexity. A stands for ambiguity. This is the 4 variables with which we are working on a daily basis. And COVID has compounded that thing. If you really see, this is the complexity we are working. Along with that kind of technology we are using, the social media, big data, all these things makes our business actually complex. Now in that element, somebody has to ensure everything is accurate, fair. He has to ensure this is taken care. It's not an easy job. Now I wanted to hear from Mr. Chandrasekharan how he handles this and maintains that smile.
Yeah, good evening. Thankfully, I don't handle complaints, I audit complaints. So that's a slightly easier task. So before I get into this, one thing I just wanted to share is if we watch around us, every product that we use is now branded as smart, right? Have you seen that? Right? It started with a smart TV, a smart watch, right? A smart refrigerator, right? Smart cars. Right? I think other than us, right? Everything else is now clearly branded as smart. Right? That's a way to sell technology. I'll just take a few minutes to explain how technology is being adopted by organizations today and how compliance comes in that phase of technology adoption. A few things that we are observing across industry, more so in regulated industry, is that organizations are obviously wanting to adopt technologies which are much leaner than what they were earlier. Earlier, the focus on technology deployments were more centralized, more like core systems. That's how they started off with a core banking system or a core application. Today, the shift is towards technologies which are much, much leaner in adoption, faster in execution. Right? Organizations are looking at cloud computing. They are looking at networks which are software driven and they are not hardware driven. They are looking at options where they need not even have a database which is a structured database. Right? They want to deal with big data. They are also looking at a lot of ways to increase the user experience that the customers have when they interface with the entity. Right? Eventually, the phase of technology that you and I would see as a non-employee, as a public, is the web presence, the mobile apps. Right? So there is a lot of investments which are going into making these interfaces much faster for customer experiences. And in that process, we are moving away from traditional data centers to a lot of other computing models, many of them which we have discussed earlier as well. A few adoptions which are very interesting is one is the cloud. We also have APIs which are now playing a very major role in ensuring that wherever your application components are, you are still able to connect and get the best use of each of the application components. We are also seeing micro-segmentation and micro-architectures which are very, very lean computing models. At the same time, there are also concerns which are coming up in terms of compliances. In the rush to make the best use of technology, there are instances which are coming up, especially in the regulated industries, where the technology deployed may not be fully compliant with the regulations of the land which are in place at this point in time. When we say this, it does not mean that there is a voluntary or a known non-compliance that an organization is taking up. It is just that it creeps into the process. Right? For example, you want to do your KYC process much faster, right? Or they want to do an authorization process. They want to do away with a step in the authorization process before a payment is processed. Or it could even be the way non-performing assets are identified and classified, right? All these are now technology-driven initiatives. There is very little or no human interference in this. But as a process, there are a lot of gaps that the regulators are noticing with fast technology adoption. On the other hand, a very interesting trend that's coming up is the regulators themselves have started to adopt technology. Now that's where it turns dangerous for regulated industries, right? On one hand, we see companies making a lot of investment in technology to better the customer experience. The regulators are also becoming sharper, right? There's always a catch-up, right? And in that catch-up game, obviously technology deployments will come first. Regulators will then realize that, oh, this does not look to be in compliance, and there will be a catch-up. But an interesting trend is regulators have invested a lot of time and energy, obviously money, in technology deployments to monitor the regulated industries. That's a very, very interesting development because no longer the data that they are collecting is static, right? It is not just that organizations file some data with a regulator and it is taken on record. Right? I'll just give you an instance of how one regulator, without naming the regulator, how they are monitoring it. There is a set of regulated industries where they are supposed to file, let's say, a very fundamental thing like how many of their systems, operating systems, patches are updated in the last quarter. Right? A very fundamental piece of information. Right? This entity, they keep filing this data every quarter. Right? They say this quarter 60% of the servers are patches are updated. Right? Next quarter they file some data, and more often than not it is taken that okay, it's some data that somebody is asking. But what they did not realize is behind the scene, the regulators have actually mapped whatever data that the organizations have given for the past 1 year. And the moment they find that the deviation is more than 10% or a stipulated percentage, they come back and tell the entity that what data that you have given us, something is not all right. This is a very, very simple example. They have taken it to the extent of, in banking, they have taken it to the extent of the banks getting a call from the regulator saying a particular advance account in a particular branch of that bank, something is not all right, you please go and check. Which means it is not just within the entity, it is across the entities, right? And you would have seen in the papers recently how a major, I would say, market-driven activity where people were trying to push the IPOs to make it appear as if the IPOs are all oversubscribed. You know what the regulators did? They did a very, very fundamental thing. They took all the IPOs which were in place for the last 1 year or 1.5 years. They simply analyzed all the demat accounts which are part of the IPO subscription. A very fundamental piece of information. You don't even require ChatGPT for it. They did this analysis. They found out there were a pattern of demat accounts which were used on the first day the IPO opens for subscription, not subsequently. But they didn't understand what it was. They did a little bit of deep dive, and then they realized all these demat accounts are mule demat accounts, which means nobody knows who the owner of the demat account is. Somebody has created a demat account at some point in time, and the best part is they did a little bit of further analysis and they realized that most of these subscriptions that had come in the first day were all later reversed because the demat account had some problem. Which means all the subscriptions to jack up the IPOs were fraudulent. And at one stroke, the market regulator have blocked all the demat accounts. This is a very classic example of how regulators are using technology to at least try to be one up, right? The players who are trying to use the same technology to their advantage. From an audit point of view, one major challenge we are noticing is earlier technologies were enablers. Now organizations run on technology platforms as their core, meaning without that platform actually that organizations don't exist. In such a scenario, how do we map the business process with the technology itself is a challenge for audit. Now we have an additional element to say that technology should not just support the business process, it should be a compliant technology, compliant with the regulations. So from an audit point of view, this is posing some challenges, and I'm sure we'll come up with more opportunities and challenges from technology and compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandra. Over to Mr. Madan. Madan, again, like Mr. Suryan, he is the CEO of Radiance Realty into real estate. So we are seeing different industries. They have gone through some transformation in reality, real estate sector. We want to hear from you, what kind of transformations you have done and how, as a stakeholder, you look at technology in finance.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'll just like to mention 3 points before I actually. I think we are now at a time where we don't have to sell the use of technology to anyone because everybody is already sold. Every one of us using a smartphone. The n number of apps that we have with all our data getting backed up in the cloud. I think even today, a 10-year-old, a youngster or a child knows that what benefits technology can deliver. So I think that phase we've crossed. Second is the learning curve which is involved in a technology. I'm sure that unless you're doing it on a day-to-day basis, you will not be up on the learning curve. I'm sure that people who are, let's say, 10 years younger to me have a better chance in actually doing something creative in technology than me, and the same for you as well. So I think as we grow up in careers, rather than competing on applying our creativity on technology, I think our major job would be to make sure that technology actually is guided in a direction which really supports the business, rather than trying to get too much deeper into the modalities of the technology unless we want to build a career in technology. So that is my limited take. And third is to my teacher and mentor, Mr. Pattabhiram. Yes, I was a CFO, I am a CEO now. I start my day with looking at the cash balance. So that portion still remains, when we do the business. I'd like to give a case study, case of where we have really implemented technology, not in the real estate space. I would like to give it in a much larger context in my previous engagement. One of the most important things while implementing technology is to make sure that the technology actually delivers that kind of a value to a business, that all the hurdles and all the obstacles that naturally come in the way of implementing it is borne by all the stakeholders until it sees the light of the day. So that I think is very important. I would give a practical example of a thing which is there in the retail space. So I was working in an environment where we had, it's not in India, it's one of the countries in the Middle East. It was a retail operation. We had about 2,400 stores spread across the country, and each store had about approximately 6 POS terminals. So the size was about 12,000 POS terminals. A POS terminal is where you swipe your card or pay cash and, collect your purchases. So about 12,000 POS terminals, each POS terminal on an average doing about 20 transactions a day. So about 2.5 lakh transactions a day, of which around 80% was through credit card. So roughly about 2 lakh credit card transactions per day. So this was the scenario. And we had about 7 tenders. So you buy a good, you can give tenders in 7 parts. One, you can pay cash, you can pay through debit card, you can pay through credit card, you can pay through your loyalty points, you can pay through a debit or a credit note, you can give an exchange voucher, or you can give a gift voucher. So these were the 7 tenders. Okay, 2.5 lakh transactions happening across 7 tenders, and naturally 80% was through credit cards. Okay. Now we had an interesting challenge. So 2.5 lakh transactions would come to accounts department, right? Let's assume that an average transaction was worth just for $100. So our sales was close to about $10 million US dollars a day. So annual sales was about $4 billion US dollars, $10 million US dollars a day. 2.5 lakh transactions, of which roughly, let us take about 8 million is credit card. Now, the next day, the bank used to credit about 7 billion to our account. So we know that we have done a credit card sales of 8 million a day, and 7 billion USD gets credited to our account, and we didn't know where the balance 1 billion pertains to. So the next day, let's assume we do again about 8 million worth of credit card transactions a day. The next day, we get 8.5 million credited. So there was certain banks used to credit with a lag of 1 day or 2 days, and believe me or not, the process which was existing, about 6 or 7 years back, was that every cashier uses to close the till, right? And all the credit card transactions, the credit card slip used to be pasted, and from across 12,000 POS terminals, All these credit card slips would be couriered across to the accounts department, which was centralized. We had about 600 member accounts department. That was a different story. But all these credit card slips used to be couriered, and we have to reconcile as to where is this 1 million which didn't get credited during the previous day pertaining to which bank, and we have to send an email to that bank stating when are you crediting it. So this was the scenario. This is only in one process which was called a C2C. There were P2P and R2R which we'll touch upon later. So we implemented a technology wherein, technology aspect is very simple because I wouldn't say we, because the technology company came and, stated all these solutions. They said connect a credit card machine to a single POS. So every credit card machine will be dedicated to a POS. You can't remove it from, you can't disconnect it from that. So that at least we know that this credit card is swiped against this POS. So that was the easier part. And the credit card machine is provided by the banks. Okay, so we went and told the bank that we have connected all your credit card machines to this POS terminal, right? So when credit card information flows from your POS to your server, it should also capture the details from our POS. So it should know that this is the transaction, this is the purchase value, this is the customer name, this is the credit card number, and this is the value of the transaction, so that we know. And when you send us the statement back, right, saying that if you credit 1 million to our account, you should again give it in this format, so that we'll put a AI or whatever it is to match it. So far so good, everything was happening. But we solved 70% of the problem. Okay, what I'm talking about is not technology. I'll come to how business impacts technology later. 30% of transaction was happening through an American bank, which was stationed in the source country in the Middle East in which we worked. So they had signed a data pact with the government of the host country, stating that at any circumstance, they will never share any customer information of a credit card to any other entity other than to the government. Okay. So the bank said, yes, I'm receiving your information now, but I will not be able to relate back to you in this format. Okay. Now, after having spent a huge amount of time and resources and money in getting up to here, if 30% is still not covered, it is as good as, have not having started that exercise at all. So what we did is, at a very, very senior level, we approached the bank which is there, which was headquartered in the US. We spoke to their CEO, and they had a meeting with this host country. They explained the details and stuff like that. And after 1 month, the bank finally agreed to give the data back to this format in a way this AI would read. And after about almost 8 months of struggle, no couriers were required anymore. So all the data would come. And every day morning, I will get an email, as the finance said, in my box saying that these are the transactions against which $1 million has not been credited. So two things I would like to tell here. One, if we really use technology in a meaningful way, it can make a huge impact. Okay. The more important point here is, if this technology has solved a very small problem, I'm sure that such large enterprise for which we worked and reaching out to their, that bank is one of the top 5 banks in the US which had a branch here. Reaching out to their CEO level would not have been possible if we were not able to demonstrate the benefit of the technology very, very, very clearly to the decision makers. Okay. If it had been some frivolous incremental information, incremental improvisation that we were making, or just a frivolous technology where we had to showcase how intelligent we are, I'm sure that this wouldn't have happened. So I think one of the major points is, when we are implementing technology, there will be partners, etc. There will be people who will be good in technology. But when you grow up to a certain level of leadership position, you have to make sure that all the efforts, heartburns, maybe a couple of resignations, whatever it is, are all worth it at the end of the day, because there is a very, very strong, clear business case or a business problem which that technology is solving. So this is one. Second example I would like to give in the same context. All of you would be now working in an ERP environment, and now P2P has become S2P2P and stuff like that. So nowadays all the invoices are being posted through vendor portals. Okay, nobody sends the invoice. There is a portal which a username and login is given for each of the vendor, and they upload their invoice. Again, same example, retail, and in this not so very advanced Middle Eastern environment in terms of technology in that specific place. We implemented a vendor portal, which was very, very instrumental in terms of cutting timelines, confusions, etc. But as expected, around almost 90% of the vendors found it very difficult to actually migrate. They said we have to upload the vendors, follow up this, that. Vendors were in Arabic, the invoices were in Arabic. Our team has to this thing. But despite that, we succeeded. Definitely, yes, technology played a role, but again, the business case here was very strong. The reason why I believe that we actually went through this hardship of 6 months to call each and every vendor, threaten 50% of them and incentivize 50% of them. In fact, we went ahead at saying that everybody who uploads the invoice through this portal will be paid in half the normal credit period for the first 1 year. Now, this is going to cost money to the business, right? And I can't go to the board or to the owner of the business and say that, we are implementing a technology and so why don't you allow us to, shorten the credit period. But there was a very big benefit here. In that country where we operated, it does not have a law of limitation. A vendor can submit an invoice even after 20 years and say that I've missed to present this invoice, why don't you make a payment? Okay? And in that particular business that we were dealing with, we used to pay at least about 5 to 6 million USD worth of invoices every year, with half doubt whether this is a genuine invoice or not. But we can't fight the people in that country. When you go to the court, 99% of the cases, only they win. We don't win. So we were an expat company. So what we did is we analyzed the last 5-6 years data, and we figured out that every year we have been paying about 5 to 6 million US dollars of invoices, which we were not sure whether we have to pay in the first place, because the invoices will be pertaining to 20 years, 15 years earlier, where none of the people in the accounts department used to work there at the time. So we analyzed it and we figured out that being Middle East, the cost of money is very cheap, right? Even if you pay within half of the credit period, what you are losing is maybe a few $100,000 a year, but you are getting a very, very huge comfort that everybody is migrating into this environment. And later, even if you go to the court, right, a vendor cannot claim that for the first 5 years I've been uploading it and this only invoice alone I missed. So that argument won't stand in the court. Okay. So with this, I would like to only state that technology is good. I would assume that 90% of the people sitting here are not core technology professionals. We are just trying to leverage technology to our benefit. And definitely, as and when we grow in our career, the success of implementation of technology clearly depends on how we are able to assess the real business impact of the technology, so that all of us endure that struggle until it reaches fruition. So this is my limited experience.
Thank you, Madan. Your overshot by 10 minutes. Just quick summary. Thanks a lot. We would have taken one more question, but since we have to wind up, as you all saw, technology can speeden the work, but it can't slow down. Even if you go to ChatGPT, it goes very fast. It doesn't slow down. Second, it doesn't still have emotions, and relationships are based on emotions. So we are going to still be there, value adding as human beings. And the last one is, even if you are a computer person, knowing technology, if you don't have domain experience, even Dunga Jain or Patabi Raman sir, when they were using ChatGPT, they know what they were asking. A good answer comes from a great question. So if you don't know what you're asking for, no technology can help us. So you can consider technology as a great partner, a collaborator, and that's a must. I think human beings in our culture, we always focus towards urgent rather than important, but we are reaching a stage where technology, knowing, embracing is important. It's not even important now, it's an urgent one. Okay. With that, we will wind up this session. Thanks for this opportunity. Thanks to each one of you for sharing your expertise and details.